Hello everybody and welcome back to more of the Fruit of Grisaia. In the last episode, Sachi woke up in the hospital where she found that her father was killed instantly in the accident and her mother was on life support and it's not looking good. And she just kept recounting the memory over and over and it caused her physical and mental pain every time she did so. So let's continue on, shall we? When I squeezed my eyes shut in an attempt to escape the cruel reality of my situation, I thought I heard someone's voice in my mind.
ねえ、サチ。どうしてあの時、家を飛び出してしまったの？どうしていい子にしていてくれなかったの？お母さんもお父さんもトラックにはねられて、とても痛かったのよ。
Since the day I accepted that the accident had really happened, these feelings had been lurking unacknowledged in the depths of my mind. That accident happened because of me. If I had listened to my parents and stayed in the house, they wouldn't have been in the street when that truck ran the red light. Even Yuko, I selfishly tried to manipulate him into coming to the park. Maybe that's why he didn't show up. Maybe he just finally got sick of me. In other words, as I spoke those words, the ringing in my ears returned for the first time in a while, harsher and shriller than ever before. A dull paralysis spread through my body, very similar to what I used to experience before fainting from overexertion on the playground. But the venomous chill crawling up my spine clearly signified that this was something else entirely. Something shadowy and unfamiliar and malevolent was attacking my body. My heart thumped violently in my chest, and in that moment, the world froze around me. The air wasn't cold, it was solid ice, so frigid as to cause physical pain. My clenched teeth began to chatter loudly. My mouth opened wide. I desperately gulped down oxygen in little gasps, every breath a painful struggle. I was wrong. And something even worse is coming next. The voice rang out in my mind again, as I knew it would.
Sachi, どうして?
And so, the nightmares began.
どう？さっちゃん、今日は食べられる？ごめんなさい。食べられません。そう。
2 weeks after that horrible night, it had become my daily routine to turn aside the spoonfuls of food my nurses offered me. At night, when exhaustion overcame me, I was forced to relive the moments of my parents' accident over and over again. By now I had completely lost the will to live. The nightmares didn't just play back my memories of that day, they caused me physical agony, incomparable to any suffering I endured while awake. My appetite disappeared in a matter of days, and of course, I couldn't get any real rest. After about a week, my body had grown visibly frail and my natural energy was replaced with lethargy and weakness. 2 days after a concerned nurse reported the situation to my doctor, he came to my bedside and asked me about a bunch of things. Can you hear voices from nowhere in particular? Can you see people who can't really be there? I'm pretty sure the questions were mostly like that. And for my answers, it took the doctor no time at all to announce that I was suffering from a specific illness. Post-traumatic stress disorder. To summarize it in his words, a mental illness caused by temporary exposure to catastrophically intense stress. With that diagnosis, it became clear that I'd suffered my own wound in that accident, My previously scheduled discharge from the hospital was postponed indefinitely. Not that my stay had produced any improvements so far. If anything, it was the opposite. The nightmares still tormented me relentlessly, and my treatment had progressed to medication and the IV tube. Through the tube, the nutrients I needed to survive were pumped directly into my veins. Through powerful sleeping pills, they induced temporary periods of oblivious rest. It felt less like I was living and more like I was being kept alive. One day, the stagnant routine was disrupted slightly. I learned that I had been given permission for an outing as part of a new phase of my treatment.
それじゃあ、あっちの方を歩いてみようか。
I was given permission to leave the hospital, escorted by one of the nurses, on the condition that we stayed well away from both my house and the site of the accident. With no particular destination in mind, we walked aimlessly around the town. Unlike the hospital, which was constantly filled with a sterile, antiseptic scent, the town smelled of the season, of people living their ordinary lives. In the distance, I could hear the chattering of grade schoolers on their way home. For the first time in weeks, I'd wondered vaguely how my friends at school were doing. The change of pace wasn't unpleasant, but my feelings were as dark and clouded as ever. I knew all too well that the physical relief of this moment was only temporary. Unless the doctor drugged me into unconsciousness, I'd see that dream again. The moment of the accident would flash before my eyes over and over, and my body would react as if it were reality twitching in my bed. If I wept in the dream, I woke up with my eyes swollen and red. If I screamed "stop" in the dream, I woke up with my throat rubbed raw. But worst of all, when the loop finally came to an end, my parents would raise their blood-covered faces from the road and curse me. An incessant, bitter rain of hateful words from which I was powerless to escape. Dad died instantly, and Mom lost consciousness soon after the accident. That last part of the dream was fake. I did understand that rationally, but every morning I awoke to find the burden of guilt resting slightly heavier on my mind. The border between reality and that cruel fiction grew indistinct. It felt entirely possible that horrible nightmare would stay with me for the rest of my life. I had committed the sin of disobedience. That dream was my punishment for treating my parents cruelly when they tried to celebrate my birthday with me.
でも、もしそうなんだとしたら、私はこれからどうすればいいの?
It didn't matter how many times I apologized in my dreams. It didn't matter how much suffering those nightmares brought me. This guilt wouldn't simply disappear. It had already grown very nearly unendurable. My heart and mind were on the verge of breaking outright, and still, I couldn't find anything close to an answer.
誰か教えてよ。
And as I whispered to that plea to myself, I noticed a parent and child walking slowly down the sidewalk toward us. A mother, her face clearly troubled, and her young son yanking rudely at her hand.
ねえ、ママ、カツオマンの人形買ってよ。だから、お人形はこの前買ったばかりでしょ。ああ、それでもカツオマンが欲しいの。ささみ怪人と戦わせるんだもん。もう、またそんなわがままを言って。いつまでも悪い子でいると、みんなマサヤのことが嫌いになって誰もいなくなっちゃうわよ。
The moment I heard those words, it was as though an icy hand had seized my heart.
やだ、そんなのやだよ。じゃあ、お人形は我慢しないとね。わかった。そうやってマサヤがいい子でいてくれれば、お人形もまた買ってあげるからね。うん。
The mother and child passed by my side, their expressions completely transformed into smiles.
そっか、そうだったんだ。こうなってしまったのは、やっぱり私のせい。私が言うことを聞かない悪い子だったから、あんなことが起こった。お父さんもお母さんもみんな私の前からいなくなったんだ。
I muttered those words under my breath, as if to persuade myself they were true. And in the next moment, I thought I could hear a switch being flipped inside my head. After that episode, my body underwent a mysterious change. I went to bed that night without any sleeping pills, but nonetheless reached morning without seeing the nightmare. Since the dreams began, falling asleep without medication had always meant a night of terrible suffering. This sudden exception to the rule surprised me greatly. But I didn't really have any idea why the nightmares would have stopped all of a sudden. Maybe I just happened to pull the lucky straw this once. As it turned out, however, these worries were unjustified. The nightmares grew steadily less frequent. My physical condition improved as well. Observing these changes happily, a nurse told me to keep it up, don't let those bad dreams come back, by way of encouragement. I promptly focused on engraving those words into my mind. Every time I whispered that mantra to myself, a voice rang out in my head. You mustn't be disobedient. A good girl doesn't do what she's told. A bad girl doesn't. Sorry, good girl does what she's told, bad girl doesn't. And when the voice fell silent, that scene flashed through my mind for the briefest of instants. As a warning, a reminder. I never ever wanted to feel that way again, and so I was determined to become a good girl. If I'm a good girl, I won't lose anything. If I'm a good girl, maybe Mommy and Daddy will forgive me someday. Over time, my mind was filled with those words. When somebody asked me to finish my dinner, I cleaned my plate, even if it meant fighting back nausea to stuff food in my stomach. Before long, I was even capable of willing myself into unconsciousness if somebody told me to go to sleep right away after lights out. Whenever I said those words and nodded my assent, the nurses called me a good girl with smiles on their faces. Whenever I heard that phrase, I could feel my sin growing ever so slightly lighter, my sense of self ever so slightly weaker. It took some time afterwards, but eventually I was discharged from the hospital, conditional on my return for thorough regular checkups. The reason naturally was that my painful nightmares had grown extremely rare, and my sleep and eating habits had returned to normal. The rapid and dramatic improvement in my symptoms did quite surprise my doctors and nurses, but I'm fairly sure the adults convinced themselves my little trip outside the hospital for a change of pace had simply succeeded beyond their expectations. However, the doctors did think it best for me to leave my hometown and the many painful memories it held behind. It was decided that I would live with my uncle Akihiro and his wife at their home in Niigata. I never visited my uncle's house even once until the day I moved there, but I didn't feel any anxiety about my new life in a new land. I did know that my uncle and auntie were kind people, and above all else, I had a clearly defined path to follow. No matter what my circumstances, I was determined to be a good girl. After all, my new conviction had virtually cured me of those unendurable nightmares. Since Uncle Akihiro was kind enough to carefully prepare everything beforehand, the movement went off without a hitch. It was decided that I transfer into a nearby school after my first week in Niigata. As it turned out, it was a modestly sized school with a fairly small student body. I was the first transfer student in recent memory and received a significant amount of curious gazes as a result. Heard she got caught up in something nasty. Didn't somebody say she got bullied really bad at her last school? At times I heard such rumors whispered in the hallways. Not that any of it bothered me in the slightest. I was entirely focused on making up for the time I'd lost in the hospital. I hadn't even touched a textbook for some time. A good girl does well in school. So as to keep myself from diverging from that image, I threw myself fervently in my classes, filling every waking moment with study and regretting the need to sleep. Over time, my dogged new approach to life changed the way my classmates viewed me. By the time we advanced to the next grade, many looked at me with respect in their eyes. In addition, on the theory that a good girl helps others, I would proactively approach those who seemed troubled and offer my assistance. Just by chasing after my ideal in this way, at some point a crowd gathered around me. As in my previous school, everyone in the class started calling me Sachi, and I made lots of friends who would invite me out to play. My uncle, who'd been worried about how I adapted to living in the country, was very pleased by all this, and my teachers offered consistent praise for my efforts in the classroom and helpful attitude. The harder I tried, the nicer everyone was, and I tried very hard indeed. The compliments and smiling faces reminded me of the happiest days of my life, when my parents had been kind to me. I grew steadily more convinced that my new way of thinking was correct. But such universal, unreserved attention for good people doesn't last beyond childhood. As if to warn me of that fact, when I advanced to the next level of school, I found the emotionally charged, malice characteristics of adolescence waiting for me.